form of contract an estimate of its cost for HVAC improvement at Bloomer and Edison Elementary Schools. Let the record show that all board members except Dr. Oggrass are present for this hearing. The Council Bluffs Community School District is holding a public hearing on the plan specifications, form of contract, and estimate of its cost for HVAC improvements at Bloomer and Edison Elementary Schools. Dr. Murillo, I will go ahead and turn it over to you for the presentation.
Mr. Wilson, would you please join me at the podium?
Thank you.
Going to help us with the slides real quick.
That's fine. Scrolling again? Yep. Thank you. With us tonight are Wyatt Wurges and Shane Haas from ETI. They are the engineers who review our HVAC needs. We do have some definite needs at Bloomer and at Edison that they're going to discuss tonight. So gentlemen, if you would join me at the podium. And then you use this button just to scroll like this. Okay.
Hi, I'm Wyatt Wurges. This is Shane. So I'm a mechanical engineer and Shane is an electrical engineer. So back a few months ago, we were played integral roles in the larger district-wide assessment. And so a couple of the schools in particular that were critically focused. The first would be Bloomer. There's a large variety. Absolutely. There's a large number of items there that were identified. In particular, there's 2 boilers that were flagged by the boiler inspectors needing to be addressed. You have 5 verticals currently. 2 of them have already been removed, and so the first project with Bloomer is to start to address that deficient boiler item. There's also a flue as part of it that needs to get addressed as well. So there's a handful of items that we're working through to try to address those deficiencies. There's some existing egress issues that would also need to be addressed as part of the project, as well as the chimney itself needs some work. So we've brought in an architect to help address those items, and then just doing some general cleanup and then those addressing older equipment in the space. So we've got a general schedule right now. We are slated to have 100% contract documents at the first couple weeks of the year, January 13th. And then we'll have walkthroughs a couple weeks after that for the bidders. And then we'll actually send it out to bid on the 10th of February. And then we'll want to come back and we'll actually bring those bids back and discuss that with the board and get it and seek approval. Ideally, we have a completion date in June. There's going to be some items we have to walk through in terms of scheduling and phasing these boilers in and out. So we might end up looking at doing some of this work over spring break, but that's still items to kind of work through to remain from a schedule standpoint. Edison, this was from our standpoint the most critical one. There's a handful of classrooms that are struggling with some mold challenges. The district's been very intentional about addressing those as best possible. There's a handful of items we're going to do to try to help from the HVAC side, and we'll continue to kind of monitor and observe. There's just an unbelievable amount of humidity in some of these classrooms, and they're doing everything they can, but this is kind of a first step, and hopefully it fixes it, and then we'll continue to monitor it after that. So we'll replace some ventilation units on the roof that are just doing some energy recovery. They're not actually cooling it, which is causing some of the humidity problems before it feeds heat pumps in the space. So we're going to go all out and clean all that up, and then we'll address another 25 heat pumps that are beyond usable life, replace those at the same time. And then there's a handful of valves that have been noted that have been blocked over time due to debris in some of the older parts of the geothermal system. So we're going to provide some separator to address that. There's some fire alarm items that were noted in the district-wide assessment that we'll bring up to code. As well as some minor electrical deficiencies. And as part of both of these projects, one of the things we're trying to do is actually develop district-wide standards that when you have new projects or projects that are renovations that occur, that you can try to get all your schools and all your facilities kind of on the same plane, and so they can be controlled similarly, have similar strategies in terms of comfort. So we're developing those kind of alongside the little pieces we touch at each school to really give you a framework for the future. And this one's following a somewhat similar schedule. It's a little bit farther behind. It's a little bit larger project than Bloomer. So plans on January 27th with walkthroughs the 10th. Another 2 weeks later, we have our bid date. And then this one, we anticipate this one kind of working through the summer, given the large amount of classrooms that'll be impacted. We've kind of set it up so we can take the cost of this and balance it across 2 fiscal years if needed, and phase it in two phases as opposed to one big project if necessary. So we're still working through the details on that. Right now, based on costs we're seeing in the field, as well as some of the additional items that we've observed on site with the chimney, we've got the Bloomer slated at estimated construction costs, $176,000. Again, these aren't final numbers. These are our anticipated costs and budget at this point. We've included a 15% contingency with that. And then at Edison, we have a much larger cost of $578,000 with another 15% contingency at $75,000. And again, we'll continue to work through these numbers and update them as, you know, as we start to, especially at Edison, track down some of that mold challenge in the spaces.
Any questions or discussion from board members?
Do those costs reflect the newer prices of materials during COVID age? Okay,
Yeah.
so we're
Yeah.
not going to see an increase that
Some of
way.
that stuff started to regulate itself out,
Mhm.
especially in the mechanical electrical side of it.
We've got a couple of recent projects to compare to as well that are fairly similar, so we feel pretty confident that these are good numbers.
And the time to bid is a good time in the field to get out. Contractors aren't overwhelmed. Starting with new, I mean, are we going to?
They're busy, but it's not.
Evened out from probably a year ago. It was really tough time to go out to bid. It's a
Right.
little bit better currently.
I've got one question regarding the ERVs at Edison. I was able to sit in on a ASHRAE low dew point DOAS meeting today, and one of the things they talked about was the importance of being able to couple the DOAS units with the mechanical system so that we can take advantage of the great potential that DOAS units have for reducing the latent load, whereas our mechanical systems have a better chance of attacking the sensible load. Are we going to be looking at coupling or keeping those ERVs decoupled from the mechanical systems?
So your ERVs currently are sensible only, which is a major part of the
Right.
problem. Right. So we'll be putting the lower dew point total energy recovery wheels that do the desiccant drying of the air as well. So those will provide ventilation air that's dry and roughly room neutral all the time. And then your heat pumps will cycle on as required, but you always will have the ventilation component
Right.
available. So they'll always work together. I think right now, so when we were on site yesterday, actually, Edison, the actual ERV that's doing the sensible piece only was actually turned off, which we have drier air right now, should be on to help flush it. So we addressed that while we were on site. In the summer is obviously the majority of the problem, but the amount of water that's coming out of those rooms is frankly, it's a huge amount. So I'm hoping that this covers it, but again, we'll continue to watch it, be on top of trying to see if there's any other issues there.
Any other questions from the board? Thank you.
Thank you.
And now is a time for public participation. If there is anyone in the audience who would like to make any comments about these plans or contracts for this project, please approach the podium now. Okay, thank you very much. I will now close this public hearing and call to order the workshop business meeting of the Council Bluffs Schools Board of Directors. Mr. Wilson, you please call the roll.
President.
Here.
Present.
Present.
Present. Now please join me in a moment of silence followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance Thank you. Next, we have an approval of the agenda. Is there an motion?
I move to approve our agenda as presented.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? We have a motion and a second to approve the agenda. Is there any discussion? Did I ask that already? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. The motion carries, and the agenda is approved. Now, next we have a approval of the minutes from the work session and workshop business meeting and annual meeting of November 10th, 2020. Is there a motion?
I can move to approve the minutes from the workshop business meeting and annual meeting of November 10th, 2020.
Thank you. Is there a second? John? Is that
Second,
good?
yes.
Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. And the motion to approve our minutes carries. Next, we have public participation. If there are any members of the public who wish to address the board with any matters on the agenda or other items of concern, please approach the podium now. Seeing no movement, I will go ahead and move on from the public participation. Next, we have the superintendent's report. Dr. Morello?
Thank you, Mr. LaFurla. This is one of my favorite parts of the agenda. I'm super excited for the student stars that we are recognizing tonight. When Diane goes through the description of why we're recognizing these students, you will be in awe. Also following that, we have an elementary school that we're recognizing tonight for their Blue Ribbon Award. We could not be prouder of elementary, and I look forward to us celebrating them this evening. So, Ms. Ostrowski, the floor is yours.
Good evening.
Good evening.
We are pleased that we have a partner in our Council Bluffs Schools Foundation to recognize our students and staff for their accomplishments. And we're also very pleased that we can do that live and in person tonight. We have been doing some of the recognition virtually or outside of the board meeting to maintain social distancing, but as you can see, we've got some great faces out there ready to be recognized. I'll start with All-State Music. District auditions for the 268-piece All-State Band and 211-piece All-State Orchestra and 601-member All-State Chorus were held virtually in October. While the 2020 All-State Music Festival concert was canceled due to health and safety concerns, there's no way it diminishes the accomplishment that these students, these young musicians, achieved as members of the 2020 All-State Band, Choir, and Orchestra. First of all, and as I call your name, would you please come forward and be recognized by Dr. Murillo? And if your parents are present, please stand. Haley Carlson for violin. Congratulations to Haley. Yes. Alvaro Peraza, also for the violin. Maybe he can tell us what his medals are there. Those are. Oh, so you get medals for making All-State. Okay, wonderful. And then for band, Rolando Martinez Rico, baritone saxophone. We should have asked for a concert before the meeting. All right. Congratulations. Did you want to get a group photo?
Yes.
Can't miss this photo op, and if anybody wants to come forward and take a closer picture, you're welcome. Congratulations. We're pleased tonight to be joined by their principals, Bridget Bellows from Abraham Lincoln and Dana Feidenberg from Thomas Jefferson. Thank you for being here to support them. Okay, we have 3 total topics tonight. This is the second, and it is about ACT. The ACT, as you know, is taken by high school students to measure their college readiness levels. A perfect score on the ACT or any subtest is a 36. Tonight, we are pleased to recognize students who earned a perfect score on a subtest, demonstrating they are more than ready for college and to be successful. I believe Bailey Christensen had another commitment and wasn't able to join us, but she did receive a perfect score in the reading subtest. So congratulations to Bailey. Caitlin Weber, a perfect score in reading. Could we recognize you? Okay. Kayla Whitworth, also a perfect score in reading. Oh. Okay, then this next person we're going to recognize, I'm going to have him stay up here for an extra special award. But Mr. Daniel Fitch, reading and science perfect subtests. Come forward, Daniel. And we'd like to talk about you a little bit more, if we could.
I'm just trying to let the board see you.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah.
I am pleased to make sure you understand what an awesome young man Mr. Daniel Fitch is. We asked him to join us to celebrate that he has been named a semifinalist in the National Merit Scholarship Program. Wow. Yeah. He joins a distinguished group of students who earned this distinction. We are extremely proud of you and your accomplishments to date, including your exceptional performance on AP exams as an AP scholar and on the ACT, as we've just demonstrated. He's joined tonight, as I said, by Principal Bridget Bellows. And is Sarah Steinmetz here tonight? No. And his parents, David and Katrina. Congratulations to you as well, Mom and Dad. And are you having a good year? Yes, good. Come on. Yes. And so he has a star for each of his accomplishments here tonight, and we visited him at Abraham Lincoln and celebrated him and some other students as AP scholars, too. So congratulations, Daniel, and best wishes. Yeah, we are. Just got to find my rate. Okay. And we will make sure the other students receive their stars. In fact, we might ask Mrs. Bellows to take them with.
I think what I'd like to do is ask the teachers and principal to come up first before you read about it.
Okay, that
So
sounds
let's have
good.
them come
Okay, Ms. Noran and representatives from Rue Elementary, could you join Dr. Murillo here in the front of the room? No picture yet, I don't think.
So I wanted them to join us up here as they are accolades or that brag on them for the great work that they've been doing. And then I'd like the whole board to take a picture with the staff that is here tonight. Becoming a Blue Ribbon School is no easy task. Only five schools in the state of Iowa, and only 4 of those 5, one was a non-public, the other 4 were public schools. And I can't tell you the work, how proud we are of the work that they do at Rue Elementary. I mean, it's amazing every time I visit your school, come in your classrooms, and I'm really thankful for the staff that we have at Rue Elementary. You guys should be so proud. I know you guys are like, how many more times do we have to celebrate? But it's a worthy note to continue to celebrate you and make sure that the board sees the work that's being done at Rue Elementary. And I would be in trouble if I didn't talk about this orange jacket. Because when this orange jacket comes out, that means there's something to celebrate. The kids know it and the staff knows it. So when he starts walking around in the orange jacket, the morning we got to go and tell the staff, as soon as he started putting that on, the whole staff was like, what is going on? And I was there, and it was just wonderful to celebrate. And so, Mr. Moran, I really appreciate your leadership there. And I appreciate how that you have brought your teachers to that level of really working together with you. The coherence that we see in the building and the love and the relationship of the caring adults, it speaks volumes. And so you are a model school for our district. And I can't tell you how appreciative I am and how proud I am of Rue Elementary. So thank you for your work. So let's take a picture. So how should we set this up so we can have a good picture from this one? Or behind you? Oh, yeah, let me let the board kind of see that.
I call Fred.
We got a really tall star plaque that we can let
Nice. I like it. Nice to get the, we had one before with Crescent.
I can relate.
You gotta be seen up there now, so I see. So nice. Now let me put it back up in front. Okay, can we have perfect, put it more in the middle. There we go. As I said, me and Mr. Moran just go to the back of the line. All right, ready? Yeah. Congratulations. Congratulations.
I've got the really tall one for Katie. I don't know why they were really tall.
Okay, thank you for coming again tonight.
Thank you, Dr. Brown. From Crescent. 9 or 10 or 11 or? Yeah. That's awesome. Take one of those every 10 years.
You can, every 5 you can, but you don't get to apply. They select you.
They selected, yeah.
Is that it?
And that ends our presentation for this evening.
Congratulations to all of our talented students, and like Dr. Burlow said, we're all very proud of Rue and all of our students and teachers and staff, and thank you all for being here. Next, we have board reflection, and Mr. Kazire is going to provide a brief recap of the IASB Delegate Assembly, and thank you, Dave, for representing Council Bluffs at the Assembly, and I'll let you give your report.
Sure. It was a very smooth assembly, even remote. It was very well attended. I believe almost every school district in the state was represented at the Delegates Assembly, and the IASB team had showed that they practiced very much or very well together to pull this off, because it I'm sure was a great undertaking to put together. There was no question that we were in challenging times, and they recognized that. Certain things changed during the Delegates Assembly. In a normal year, it's very common to bring resolutions to the floor, and it happens quite often. But this was a new challenge this year. You had to submit any changes to the agenda prior to the meeting 2 days prior to the meeting. So if you had an agenda item that you wished to be addressed, it had to be brought 2 days before. Otherwise, it was going to take 67% of the body to suspend the rules to allow a resolution to come to the floor. And that happened on one occasion at this meeting, and it centered around looking at how we address the budget guarantee. And the Cedar Rapids School District, along with the Waukee School District, came together and came together with a resolution that talked about increasing the budget guarantee for 1 year from the typical just 1% to 3% guarantee. And I know that would take a lot of funding from the state to be able to do that, but I believe the body recognized the challenge that all school districts are facing in this state, and that a 1% guaranteed, as we saw in our work session, does not come close to what our actual expenses, to be able to cover our actual expenses in this year of declining enrollment. Just to give you an idea, they were over 77% of the body agreed that we should suspend the rules to address this one issue. So that was quite comforting to know that those other board members realized that we have to do something different about meeting the needs of our students, and being able to increase the budget guarantee from 1% to 3% for this 1 year would be very helpful for us to be able to provide for our students. The five priorities that came out of the Delegates Assembly on the 17th of November are first, and they're in no order of importance, the COVID-19 remediation, mental health, preschool funding, school funding in general, and then also state supplemental aid. They talked about they spent quite a lot of time, we spent quite a lot of time on what does COVID remediation look like. And there were several things that they discussed. One would be to hold our funding rates at what we were funded last year, so that we're kind of held harmless for the events that have happened through no fault of our own. That was one activity that they looked at. The other part was local decision making, being able to have more local authority regarding what our path should look like through these challenging times, and as well as increasing funding to our schools. It was a very good delegates assembly. John, the last 2 years, was our delegate, and I know you had a good experience during those times, at those 2 times, and it was very enlightening to see that Council Bluffs is not alone. There are other districts similar to us, and even smaller and larger than us, that are facing so many challenges that we know that the state is going to have to come in and help us. And the last I checked, we have roughly $800 million in our rainy day fund. And if what we're not going through at this time in our lives is not a rainy day, then I don't know what is. And I think we need to pressure our legislators to dip into this rainy day fund, because it is going to have such a negative impact on a generation of kids through no fault of their own, are going to be left behind. And I, for one, and I know you as board members, can't stand that, can't stand for that. We need to advocate and yell as loud as we can and pressure our legislators as much as we can to get the funding that we need. And we can't be quibbling about 1 or 2%. We need the funding so that, and we all know as board members that students learn best when they're in front of a highly trained teacher and staff member. And we are hurting so much to have that necessary training for our teachers. They've never seen it. We have never seen anything like that. And they are in need of so much help to be able to manage the classroom, to be able to implement differentiated learning online. I can only imagine the struggles that they encounter on a daily basis. And we as board members and as a community need to be those advocates for our students so that our teachers can have that training and that professional development so that they can be the best teachers that they can be for our students, because we know that our students will be the benefactors of the spending that we put in our professional development for our teachers. So we need to be out there meeting with our community members to call, to email, and to contact our state legislators. And even, as Jill stated, to any state legislator who is willing to listen to us, because while they might not represent us as from their district, if they hear enough voices from enough people from around the state, they'll know that it's not an isolated incident. It's a global incident in our state that we need to get the funding so that we can put the best teachers in. And I know we have the best teachers in our schools. It's just that they have never had to teach like this before, and they need additional help. They need the help from us as board members to be their advocate at the state level. So that's my reflection, we've got a lot of work to do, but I think we as a board and as a community are ready and willing and able to do that task of being those advocates for our students and our teachers.
Any questions for Dave? Thank you, Dave.
Yeah, I enjoyed it.
That budget, 3% budget guarantee is another, we talked about earlier, some ideas that aren't necessarily going to cost additional money. But that budget guarantee is an example of another solution to just an increase in state supplemental aid. But I'm just wondering, are there any districts in the state that are not experiencing a decrease in enrollment? Because that's essentially what it would be, is an SSA increase for the year.
Well, right, pretty much. Yeah, and that's what they talked about. They talked about which is more important, being increasing the SSA or increasing the budget guarantee. And throughout the conversation, they felt that a one-time increase in the budget guarantee could be more effective at being able to get those dollars in the coffers of the school districts.
Well, thanks, Dave. Now we are moving on to the student achievement report. Dr. Marilla?
Yes, thank you. At this time, I'm going to ask Dr. Worthman to join me at the podium. His presentation tonight has been long in coming. It's a lot of good work is going on. He has a great team that he's working with, and he is, what he told me, I'm the spokesperson tonight, but I'm pretty excited about this. But please know, this is a heavy lift. This is something that
has been started and will probably take a year and a half to complete. But it's good work and it's really student-centered. So Dr. Voigtman?
Thank you, Dr. Murillo. I got maybe the short straw or the long straw, I'm not sure tonight. But I'm here on behalf of a group of district stakeholders, primarily those that represent schools, those that represent English language learners, student family services, teaching and learning, special education, and professional growth, all getting together to collaborate around how we can better serve our students, both who need additional support and additional enrichment. So we're going to talk tonight about multi-tiered systems of supports, which is a mouthful, but what it really means is how do we respond to students when the universal core is not enough. And MTSS, as it's better referred to, is not something that we created in district, but this is an initiative that has been catching a lot of attention across the state and across the nation. And if you recall back about 10 or 15 years ago in your educational jargon, this would be kind of a replacement for what was known as RTI. So RTI was a very big fad phase that we went through educationally about 15 years ago, and that was response to intervention. So how are we going to put pyramids and different types of supports for students? And that was a really good first step into meeting student needs. But what RTI focused on was only the very top portion of the pyramid, the students who needed the most intensive supports, and forgot that the most important thing is having a really strong instructional core. And so that's what an MTSS system does. It engages the entire system in looking at top to bottom how we're supporting students in universal tier, but also how we're looking at students who need additional things beyond the core. So that kind of gives you a snapshot of what an MTSS system looks like and why it exists. But we've kind of created a graphic to kind of represent the things that we're working on and the things that we need to do as a system in order to strengthen our system in Council Bluffs. And we start by kind of the foundation or the building blocks. Those pieces that are at the bottom represent the work that we're going to be doing as a district-wide team. And these are the things that we know hold up a good MTSS system. Number one, it takes leadership. And we'll be looking at how we create lateral capacity in our schools and in our buildings, from principals to teacher leaders to district leaders, around actually implementing this work in the coming years. Secondly, as I've already mentioned, universal instruction is paramount in an MTSS system, because we want to make sure that it is strong so that we have enough resources to target them around the students who need it most. And you've heard me say over and over again in the last 10 years, there will never be enough resource to intervene our way out of poor quality universal instruction. And that's why universal tier has to be the most important part of an MTSS system. We also have to make sure that we have the infrastructure to hold up the MTSS system, and that means that we create content knowledge and we build capacity in our teachers and our support staff around what an MTSS system does and how we respond when students need additional support. We use assessment and database decision making to drive the conversations and to help us make decisions about what supports are most appropriate for students. And we have come a long way in the past 5 years into getting much more diagnostic about what data we're going to use to measure student achievement. And I think the use of our MAP growth assessment gives us a great leg up on looking at how we can ensure that students are growing between testing periods and they're achieving during an academic year. And then lastly, we have to have a strong intervention system. So when universal tier is not enough, how do we serve those students who need additional enrichment beyond the core, or those who need additional support in remediation above and beyond the core? And we look at that through really 3 distinct lenses. Obviously, the one that I am the most passionate about is academics, because I want to make sure that we raise student achievement for all students in our district. But equally as important are the other 2, and that is that we're able to respond to the behavioral needs of students as well as the social and emotional needs. And where they all come together is really the hinge point of an MTSS system, because they really encompass the whole child. And that's what an MTSS system is designed to do, to meet the needs of a student wherever they are, whenever they come to our building so that we can take them to where they want to be. As I said before, universal instruction is really designed to meet the needs of all students. It's the best thing that we can do to make sure that all students have access to high quality instruction in the classroom. And that's why it's designed for all kids. So regardless of a student's needs, we can ensure that they get high quality instruction on a daily basis. But sometimes universal instruction is not enough, and some of our kids need additional supports. So you'll notice that above and below universal instruction is what we call targeted intervention or targeted enrichment. And this is designed for a few students. We can't have all of these systems that are pointed at all students because our system will collapse. It'll collapse on itself, it'll be too heavy. Then we also have intensive, which is at the very ends of the system. And that is reserved for a very few number of students. And as we work through this system, we'll be continuing to provide professional development, gather input and feedback from stakeholders along the way, so that we put processes and procedures in place for how students move in and out of these three tiers, above and below core instruction. So all of those things together make up a good MTSS system, and that's what we're hoping to accomplish. Now, I'm not saying that we certainly don't have things in place already. We do. In fact, we have a lot of things already in place that are meeting the needs of students. So when we look at our current reality, we have resources in our elementary and secondary buildings that are designed to meet the needs of the whole child, both academically, behaviorally, and social emotionally. And that ranges from graduation coaches to student support teams to reading interventionists and instructional coaches, to talented and gifted services and English language learner services. However, what we want to do better is look at our system and figure out how we can better coordinate and integrate those services together so that we have a comprehensive system that has cohesion all the way through our system, regardless of what grade you're in or what school you go to. So our roadmap, as we look kind of in the rearview mirror, we started really down this pathway of this kind of differentiated support for students back in our first, we call it the DAYS manual, which was determining appropriate intervention services for students. And that was really an elementary initiative that started and was implemented in 2011. And it served us well for many years. It helped us identify kids when they needed tier 2 or tier 3 intervention, and it helped us put good data together to identify students who needed special education services. In the spring of 2018, we went through our first round of ESSA determination. So ESSA is the Every Student Succeeds Act. It's the federal law that requires us to identify schools who need additional supports. And we had a couple of schools who were identified as needing targeted supports. And as a result of that, the State Department paid us a visit. They brought in a team of people from the State Department, and their primary focus was on engaging those stakeholders in a self-assessment of how well our MTSS system was meeting the needs of schools. And that was kind of our first big aha, that we had some holes and gaps that we needed to fill as a district. Because that helped propel us on this path forward with MTSS, the state allowed us as a district to pilot a district self-wide assessment of MTSS, which we did in the fall of 2019. And that's when we started to realize that we had some things not only at the building level, but at a district level that we could do better to help support the work in our schools. So in the spring of 2020, we created a district-wide leadership team. Like I said, it has members from multiple areas in our school district that are really charged with designing the frame. So we're going to put together some parameters that we need to operate under to get a more cohesive procedures and policies in place for MTSS. We've started this work and then COVID-19 hit, so we kind of pressed the pause button. But we believe it's very important for us to pick up this work. So we've been meeting over the past several months and are getting very close in the next couple of months to be going and getting feedback from people on our plan. So we'll be working when we come back from Christmas break. on developing some shared understanding and some shared knowledge among our district leadership team about what a good MTSS system should do. And then we'll be developing kind of a district-wide framework or kind of those parameters that we'll be using to take out to buildings to get feedback from principals, teachers, and parents. And that'll happen towards the end of the school year, about in Q4. We'll be doing some training over the summer about how we will implement this in our buildings with a hopeful launch in the fall of 2021. So that's kind of the why we're doing it, how we're doing it, and where we're headed over the course of the next year. And we'll be bringing you updates in Friday notes, and then hopefully when we get started in the fall, we'll be able to give you an update on our implementation. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Any questions from the members of the board?
No. I guess this is more probably about current situation, I guess. What does intervention look like right now? Just, it's probably tough.
So intervention is somewhat difficult, especially when we are either in remote or students are attending virtual academy or in the hybrid plan. Because one of the things that we know that makes a good intervention system is it's sustained. And when we see kids face-to-face every other day, that makes it difficult for us to monitor progress accurately and to see consistent patterns of achievement growth over time. So some of that, depending on the need of the student, some of that intervention is pull-out. So like for example, at elementary, we have reading interventionists who are specifically identifying students in primary grades, that they pull them out and provide them an additional dose of support. Some of that happens in classrooms with teachers. So they may pull a small group of students together to differentiate instruction, whether that's in mathematics or in reading. As it gets up into the middle school and high school grades, those things usually become more in the form of services rather than a typical intervention. So a student may qualify by need for special education services or for English language learner services or talented and gifted services. Both of those are appropriate spectrums above and beyond core instruction.
And have we, I guess, have we learned anything through this past few months that changes how we look at how we deliver any of our services, or the ability to use some sort of shared pool of services using some of the tools we've created to deal with the pandemic?
I can tell you that one of the biggest pieces of feedback that we've heard, especially from teachers, is the importance of students being in school face-to-face, especially with our reading interventionists. It's very, very, very difficult for them to try to intervene with students when they don't see them consistently. It's probably the biggest takeaway.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Maybe we'll hear an update on that program in the future.
It also provides, one thing that Dr. Worthman, I forgot to prompt you on, Dr. Worthman, that when we talked earlier about, it also provides us an ability to kind of monitor how many students are going in which direction beyond the universal tier. That helps us also identify if we need to strengthen some things in the universal tier, or if we have too many students that may be needing more intervention. So it does provide another data set for us to look at, which I really appreciate. Yes, that will help me. You know, I live and die by what I can see in data, right? So the next and last presentation this evening, Mr. Wilson, will you join me at the podium? He'll present our guests that will be presenting on the 1920 audit report.
By the way, I checked, and the Revenue Estimating Committee is meeting this Friday at 1:30. So, you going down there, Troy, to be with them?
Oh, yeah, let's do it. You don't go with me.
So I'd like to introduce Justin Hope. Justin was promoted to partner this last year at Simon Johnson.
Nice,
So
congrats.
congratulations. Brian Green was the partner in charge of our account, you may recall. So what we did this year is, Justin and I talked about it, he is the partner in charge on the account. However, on our audit report, he had Mr. Darren Ostin, who's an audit partner also at Simon Johnson, review our audit report. I've known Darren probably 30 years, and he is very well versed in governmental accounting and does a lot of county hospitals in Nebraska and Iowa, and also does a lot of HUD corporation audits. So he was a good backup member to review this. So he's going to go over the audit report tonight. The Finance Committee last week, and I know that Kyle was on it, and so was John. We went over this with the same presentation. So we did do that. And then there's a small internal control point that is in the audit that I would like a chance at the end to just explain just a little bit more to the board of what's going on. So, Justin, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for having me this evening.
Thank you.
We will go through these fairly quickly, circle back on questions maybe after the slides and touch on anything that you'd like to come back to. So you have two deliverables that were sent in your board packet. Right now, both of them are in draft form. There's a report to the Board of Education. These are my required communications under my auditing standards to you as the Board of Education. And then there's also the audit report, which is the financial statements and the footnotes and all of those sort of documents. They are in draft form at this point as to where they would usually be final or complete at this time of year. Due to the ESSER funding, the education, it's the elementary secondary school emergency relief funding that came out. Guidance is not available for me to complete my audit procedures. They've given everyone the money and they said, go spend it, but they haven't told us how to test that and how to check that out. So right now, that's kind of the open piece. All of the other work is complete. I don't expect things to really change from the drafts that you have. But that's the reason they're not complete at this time. So in the required communications, this is in the report to the Board of Education, significant matters related to the conduct of the audit. It talks about the standards we use to complete the audit, and it talks about my responsibility under professional standards. We plan and perform our audits to obtain reasonable assurance, not absolute assurance, about whether the financial statements are free from material misstatement. And ultimately, in draft form as they sit now, our audit report has an unmodified opinion or a clean result. That's the best result you can get out of an audit of the financial statements. We look at the accounting practices that management uses, the judgments and estimates in the financial statements, and you can see these listed here on the slide. The judgments and the estimates, these are ability where management has the ability to influence the outcome in the financial statements, so we spend quite a bit of time looking at these areas here on the bottom bit of the slide. We did have some audit adjustments, and Mr. Wilson will touch on those, I think, at the end. 3 of them were provided by management. Probably half of them relate to accounts payable cutoff, which is getting invoices and costs in the correct fiscal period. That's a massive undertaking to go through with all the invoices and things that come flying through the accounting office. Other significant matters, we did have one past audit adjustment. This is something we uncovered that's not necessarily correct, but it's not at the matter where we feel like we need to correct the financial statements for it. No disagreements, no major issues, no difficulties. Things went very well. We were able to perform our procedures remotely. And Mr. Wilson and his team were fantastic getting us all the information we requested, timely and appropriate responses, and we were able to have conversations with the folks we needed to have conversations with through our process. There's also a report or a letter on internal control. No issues under the government auditing standards and the uniform guidance. That's our single audit or our federal funds testing. Again, in draft form, knowing that there's still some guidance on ESSER to come. The district has received good information from the state of Iowa on here's how you should be using these funds and what you've done. Primarily, those funds went to purchase Chromebooks, so that was fairly straightforward to test that piece of it. So we did have 2 what I call like base level control deficiencies. There's 3 levels, and this is the lowest level. It's something to be aware of. The accounts payable cutoff, we kind of spoke about that a moment ago. That was the bulk of the journal entries were related to that process. And in speaking with Mr. Wilson, and he'll address at the end of this, that he's already kind of revise some procedures and things to address that going forward. And then prepaid expenses, it's the same sort of thing, cut off. Then there's also a bunch of information on upcoming GASB standards, accounting and financial reporting pronouncements, things that will be changing in the future that will keep Dean and I very busy going forward. In the audited financial statements, you have the independent auditor's report on the first couple of pages here. Again, unmodified opinion. There's also some information about what's required supplementary information, what's other supplementary information, and then also the schedule of expenditures of federal awards, details all the different federal funding sources that come through the district. There's the management discussion and analysis, sort of a high-level summary of everything that goes on beyond that. And then the financial statements government-wide is everything all in the pool together. You have your fund financial statements to see the construction funds separate from your general fund, which is where all your operations are. And then these footnotes highlighted here, some important information about the goings-on in the district. I like to joke, if you're having trouble sleeping, crack this open and we'll be down in no time. There's, again, budgetary schedules on the pension liability, supplementary information showing some of the combining fund. You have a few different construction or capital project types funds that shows those in greater detail. The schedule of expenditures of federal awards, and the findings and question costs, which is sort of the reporting on the federal awards. Total federal awards this year, about 10.2 million. That's fairly consistent with the previous year, maybe just a little bit down, and I would infer that's probably from the closure of school in March. Some of those expenditures weren't happening. So we test and report on compliance with the program requirements and also the internal controls over those programs. This year it was Title I. And due to the size of it, the ESSER funding got picked, which is why we're sitting in draft form again. Those two programs were about 31% of the total federal awards that came through the district. A slide on IPERS. I'm not going to hit on this too hard. You know you have to pick up a share of your IPERS total pension liability that amounted to about $54 million. This isn't a dollar amount that the district owes or has to pay. It's an estimate of over time what the future costs of providing those pension benefits will be. OPEB is the same thing. It's relates to retiree health insurance. Again, not a direct liability in the sense that you're going to have to write a check for this. It is a pay-as-you-go plan. Well, I'm not sure what that one is. I apologize. I have it on.
Okay, that's probably got converted over to Google Slides.
I apologize. In your packets, I hope you have some multicolored bars. So the first one is governmental fund revenue. I'll kind of give everybody a second to. That's on page 8 or slide 16. So you can see kind of the trend with governmental revenue. These are your service providing funds. This is your general fund and also your capital projects funds primarily is what's going through here. You can see these kind of on a steady increase. Along with that, on the next slide, governmental fund expenditures track right along with those. Slide on bonded debt at about $92.5 million at the end of June. Unassigned general fund balance. This is what general funds do we have available to pay the next fiscal year, so fiscal 21s. You have about 9% of a reserve. Goal is to keep that in that 8 to 10 range, so doing well, doing well there. General fund revenue, again, this is where primarily all of the school district operations, the instruction all runs through. Down just a little bit, about $1 million in revenue. Again, some of that is due to the closure, and the expenses track right with it. The expenses are down. Also, fund balance, then as a result, you did have a positive result in your general fund. The fund balance increased about $1.5 million here, which tracks back from a couple slides ago, your unassigned fund balance. Schedule of federal awards is the next slide here, 10.2 last year and 10.15 this year, so very, very consistent. And then the last couple slides are levy rate per valuation. And taxable valuation, which is on the rise, which is always a good thing. And then enrollment for 2020, which gets certified in 2019, was up. But again, you had some discussion earlier about that decreasing and the effects that will have on future district finances. So those were the slides that I had. Be happy to entertain questions. That. I know we got.
Any questions from the board?
I don't have any questions, but I do have a comment. I'm grateful for the work that Dean and the audit team at Simon Johnson does every year. I remember many years ago, they talked about making sure that we change our auditors they recommend every 3 years. And not only that, they recommend this, sometimes they said they would recommend changing firms, but we meet that requirement because we change our auditors every 3 years. So I'm very grateful that we have the historical knowledge at Simon Johnson for knowing how our district operates and being able to keep that continuity going from one year to the next when our audit is being performed. So thank you as a representative.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
So the audit point that he was making about the cutoff, what that is he said is that there were expenditures that we put in 1920, that when they reviewed them, they should have been in 2021. And the reason that happened is that my compadres on the executive council said, well, I want this in this budget year. Understandably so, okay? But we either have to pay for the item or have it delivered on or before June 30th, 2020 to count it in that year. So we had to shift some stuff around, and that, as Justin pointed out, was the majority of these audit entries. So what we're going to do next year is starting on about June 20th, any invoices over $5,000, I am personally going to review to make sure that we do put it in the proper year. It's always my goal to not have any of these darn audit entries. And we usually have about 5 to 7 every year, and it drives me up the wall. But I'll get over it. So that's our presentation.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Dean, you also talked with me when we went through this together about companies that closed and didn't invoice us in a timely manner because of COVID too.
That is correct. We literally had people sending us invoices from March and April while they were doing their audit work in late September. And we would call them up and say, why didn't you send this to us earlier? Well, we weren't working, or it got lost or something. But we did have some of that as well, yes.
Good job, Dean.
Thank you.
Congratulations on another clean audit. And I learned a lesson there that if there ever is a mistake, you just blame some other people in the room.
That's right.
And that brings us to our resolutions. Our first resolution is acceptance of the audit, but since he said that as draft form, I'm assuming we should table that to a future meeting.
Well,
I think we could.
I was going to accept it as is, and then if
Right.
there's any extra work, we would bring that back. But if you want to wait, that's up to you as well.
Okay. So I will entertain a motion to accept the 2019-2020 audit report, knowing that we can come back and reaffirm a different version later if we need to.
Yeah, I'll move that we accept the report as it stands right now, knowing that we may have to redress.
We have a
Second.
motion. Is there a second? Motion is second. Any discussion?
Do we have any idea when the report would be finalized?
We are waiting for the Office of Management and Budget to release the regs. We're supposed to come out over the summer, and we still don't have them.
Could be a while. Okay.
Any other questions or discussion? We have a motion to accept the audit report. Mr. Wilson, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Arthur?
Yes.
Mr. Kazire?
Yes.
Mr. Minshaw?
Yes.
Mr. McGlade?
Yes.
Ms. Shudak,
Yes.
and Mr. Kazire, Mr. LaFurla, I'm sorry.
Yes, and the motion to accept the audit report carries. Next, we have a motion to approve a Chapter 12 exemption request, requesting permission from the Department of Ed to offer physical education services every day for one semester rather than every other day for the full school year. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Got a motion, is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Mr. Wilson, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Arthur,
Yes.
Mr. Minshaw,
Yes.
Ms. Shudak,
Yes.
Mr. McGlade,
Yes.
Mr. Kazire,
Yes.
Mr. LaFurla.
Yes, and the motion passes. Next, we have motion to appoint someone from the board to the Pottawatomie County Assessors Conference Board. And I asked John if he'd quickly give us a little report and maybe walk through what the expectations are before we carry through with the motion.
Yeah, I'd do that, Chris. So basically this year, the representative will be the liaison for the county. The board is made up of mayors, school board members, and county representatives. As the liaison, you'll meet with the county assessor and I believe Mayor Walsh and one of the members from the county board in late January, early February, and they'll kind of go over the assessor's budget. They'll talk about any challenges to assessed values in the county, anything that's in court. And then there's a meeting in mid-February where these take about I'd say probably half hour, and they'll go over the entire budget for the assessor's office. Again, talk about all the anything that's being challenged, and then in early March is where the board will meet again to approve the assessor's budget for the upcoming year, and they'll have some resolutions to go over.
And John, you've served as the, for 2 or 3 years?
Two or
probably?
3 years, I believe. It's actually very interesting. The first meeting, when you're in the room with the 3 representatives and Penny, the county assessor, I learned a lot in that meeting. So it was pretty interesting.
Well, the structure is pretty similar. When each of the bodies, so the county representatives, the city mayors, and then the school districts will convene a caucus, and you'll talk about how you want to represent your vote for approving the budget. So you'll vote, you'll caucus as your group, and then say, okay, we as school districts approve this budget, and so each of the three bodies has a singular vote to approve the assessor's budget.
Now, are you wanting to do this again? No.
Unless
Are you wanting a
unless
break?
someone else is
A break.
interested, I would do it, unless we have anyone else that wants to give it a shot.
John doesn't want to take all the fun away from it.
It's painless.
Yeah.
It is.
And like I said, learn a little bit about what's going on, what companies are.
I guess I'm ready to make a motion then. I move that we appoint Jill Shudak to the county board, county assessors board.
Second.
Thank you, Dave.
John can have
Well, you
That's
did
John.
indicated you were interested, so
it. John seconded that.
I thought I might as well strike while the iron is hot.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
There was one more thing. I believe since I'm the liaison this year, like this happened when the first year I took it, I should be getting a packet sometime in January. So I'll get with you and make sure you have the information.
Thanks, John.
And a check.
I'll hang on to that.
Okay, Mr. Wilson, please call the roll.
Mr. Kazire.
Yes.
Mr. Minchell.
Yes.
Mr. McGlade.
Yes.
Ms. Hudak.
Yes.
Mr. Arthur.
Yes.
Mr. LaFurman.
Yes, and the motion to appoint Jill to the County Assessors Conference Board passes. Thank you, Jill, for volunteering, and thanks, John, for your years of service.
I heard you're wanting to get out after all these assessments have gone up. For all the fights and the legal battles. That's smart. Sorry, Joe.
Now we have a resolution for the Wilson Middle School change order. Is there a motion?
I'll move to approve the proposed change order for Wilson Middle School as presented.
A second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Dr. Murillo, do you want to just provide a little information about the change order for us?
Sure. I'll ask Mr. Myers to join me at the podium. With the infrastructure improvements that we did not see behind the walls, that really has prompted with a few others. And I'll let, maybe Daryl, it might just be a good idea for those watching too, for you just to kind of do an overview and explain why.
Okay, sure.
And then we'll answer any additional questions.
Yeah. First of all, I'll kind of frame it a little bit. You know, at Kern we started going back to Kern. We started at a 4.8% contingency, and with the one change order that we did, it went up to 6.59% of the project. And typically, it's very common in renovations to be somewhere between 6 to 10%, just because there's so many things that you can discover. So in order to give you a better analysis of this, I went through and kind of worked with Dean Wilson and Dr. Murillo and identified the things on the spreadsheet in the orange that were what we consider kind of voluntary improved finishes. And after we finished Kern, we liked how much it looked. That kind of sets the standard. I mean, Wilson has to be just as good as Kern, and we will, I know Dr. Murillo has insisted that. So the items in orange are things that we elected to do after the bid, and some of the big items were adding wainscot tile to the hallways, some color changes in the LVT science room flooring, which we decided at Kern that just the bare floors with all the cutouts in the floor just wasn't going to look good. And you've seen how good they look. Those are the big items. And then at Wilson, it's a little bit older building. It's a 1961 building, and we've discovered a number of infrastructure things that just made sense. Either we had to do them, or it just made sense to do it. And so we're looking at some pretty big ticket items like changing the feeder wire for the main power into the building. Turned out that needed to be replaced. We had a large item with replacing roof drains in the original part of the building. It turns out they were PVC. They probably shouldn't have been to start with, but the way the new codes work, they shouldn't be PVC, and it was actually causing some of the roof leak issues that we had. So we included that. We found the main sewer line going out of the building. The actual plans that we were working on from the original building showed that to be a 12-inch line, so that's the way it was designed. Come to find out, it was a 10-inch line. Mm-hmm. So we're putting in a new sewer line going out the building. So that's just to highlight a few of the things, of what we've used so far in the contingency. It's about $456,000 of the contingency we've used are lumped in those two categories, and that leaves about $127,000 of things that we've just that aren't in those two categories. So with with this added change order, we started at 4%, which was, I think, probably optimistic, and we thought, well, we're going to start low. We can always go back and talk to the board and get to add money to the contingency. With this, it'll put it up to about 6.5%, which is still going to be slightly less than we ended up with the current. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions from the board?
How far are we into the, I mean, do we expect more issues to be uncovered?
We expect the infrastructure and the owner, probably the owner items, to drop way down, because those have been discovered. So now we're probably into we've completed about half the project, and as you go through a project, the discoverables are greater in the beginning and they get less towards the end. So I think, we know that there's still going to be things we found. Like we had to make a small change in one office. We found out, that it wasn't going to be large enough, so we moved a couple walls, and that shouldn't be relatively inexpensive. We're doing some work for technology department that's going to help them out, make them a little bit more efficient by moving some closets, but we're pretty optimistic that we'll finish the project with this change order.
Any other questions? Thank you. We have a motion and a second to approve the Wilson Middle School change order. Mr. Wilson, please call the roll.
Mr. Mitchell?
Yes.
Ms. Hudak?
Yes.
Mr. Arthur?
Yes.
Mr. Desire?
Yes.
Mr. McGlade?
Yes.
And Mr. LaFurla?
Yes. And the motion carries. And I think finally, we have a resolution for the TriCaster video systems for ESC and Thomas Jefferson. Is there a motion?
I can move the board approve the bid from KCAV for the TriCaster video systems in the amount of $27,120.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I second that.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
I just had a question. Do we currently have any of this TriCaster video system in the district?
We do. AL has one, and we use it over at the stadium. We have wanted to upgrade our system here in the boardroom, so that's what the one at the ELC will do. So we'll have better capability to broadcast for those watching at home. And then the other one will go to TJ so that they can run their boards and run when they play at the athletic field.
TJ,
yeah.
Okay, so we've been pretty happy with it.
Yes.
Okay, good.
And that one was free. A donor purchased that one. Okay, we have a motion and a second on the TriCaster video system. Mr. Wilson, please call the roll.
Mr. Arthur?
Yes.
Mr. Desire?
yes.
Ms. Hudak?
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell?
Yes.
Mr. McGlade?
Yes.
And Mr. LaFurla?
Yes, and the motion carries. Now we have our consent agenda, which includes a revised tuition agreement with Heartland Family Services, the 2021-22 high school program of studies, special education contracts, the personnel report, and claims and accounts in the October financial report. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
You have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Mr. Wilson, please call the roll.
Ms. Hudak?
Yes.
Mr. Arthur?
Yes.
Mr. Desire?
Yes.
Mr. McGlade?
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell?
Yes.
And Mr. LaFurla?
Yes, and the motion to approve the consent agenda passes. And that concludes our business. Thank you, everyone.